This is the Tesoro AI podcast with Darius Gant. AI is changing the world and fast. This episode is coming to you courtesy of Tesoro AI, the #1 recruiting service for software development and AI talent.
All right, Hunter, welcome to the show. I appreciate you taking some time out to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's hop in. Just looking at your background, I'm going to give a quick synopsis, but you got started, I guess, your educational background, Penn State, and then looks like first job out of college, you were able to hop into Capital One as a software engineer. Interestingly, I found that was one of the larger organizations that started, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, by the way. But one of the larger organizations that started to adopt AI, and then continued down your path as a software engineer, moving into Amazon, where you got some experience applying machine learning to low latency distributed systems in advertising, and then progressed through your career through software engineering up until the point where you launched Ellipsis. But would love for you to elaborate any places that we should dive into specifically related to your professional career, personal life, and then more specifically, where did AI come into play for you?
I started at a pretty atypical background. I'm actually a published astrophysicist. I thought I was going to go get my PhD and contribute to science and, help out that way. And on my 8th semester of undergrad, I decided there's no way I wanted to live on a $35,000 stipend for the rest of my 20s. So I decided not to do that and took my data science / self-taught engineering background to Capital One. And at the time, Capital One was the second largest adopt of folks who had AWS certifications. So outside of AWS, they were the largest company to hire people who built with AWS. And that's really why I went there, because they were having a big push to cloud. They were running enormous workloads in a lot of their data science. I particularly worked in the capital markets group. And this is all because they were like super forward leaning, right? And they were learning all the cutting edge stuff. So I learned a lot there. And it was great because I was a self-taught developer, like I said. So it was on the job training. Now, this went all down the drain and actually bit me in the butt when I was in an AWS interview and I had this data structures and algorithms type of questions that I was being evaluated on. And of course, those are like undergraduate computer science type of challenges. And so I did really poorly the first time I interviewed for Amazon. And I was like, I don't like this experience at all. I don't like that I, as a developer who at the time had about 3 years of experience, I felt like I should have done better in that interview process. But I didn't because I didn't have this background. And so this is actually where my first startup idea came from. I built a company called The Practical Interview after hours. And the whole idea was to make the technical assessment process more like day-to-day work for software engineers. So ideally, hiring managers would get to see how a candidate works on the job if the interview was more like the job. And then candidates would have an interview experience where they could really represent themselves because it, kind of mapped to their day-to-day work. And so I tried to build this product that did that, which really meant putting candidates in a code base they were unfamiliar with and asking them to extend it by adding some feature or fixing some bug or something like that. And to dynamically generate those code bases, I was using AI. This is in 2019. OpenAI had just come out with the first model called Codex. And this is my first foray into building AI developer tools using LLMs.
Interesting. So in 2019, because when most folks talk about anything related to OpenAI, any LLM, it's as of what, 2022? Earliest. So interesting that you were kind of in and around that space. And was it at the point where you're using natural language to then help you to write code?
Yes, it totally was. And so we would prompt these LLMs just like we do today. But like you said, this is in the before ChatGPT era. So it's so it was super rough back then. This model that I was using is called Codex. I got early access to the alpha. It was actually the first AI model released by OpenAI that would then power GitHub Copilot. So it powered GitHub Copilot for about a year. And then they released GPT 3.5, which powered it for a while and eventually 4. And so it was really rough back then. For example, you would say, hey, build me a Python class that represents a calculator. It should have add, subtract, divide. and then it would write the class definition line, so the first line out of maybe 20, and then it would just start repeating itself over and over and over and over again. And so this
Okay.
was an era where, yeah, you could prompt it with natural language, but you also had to work really hard to filter and improve the outputs, do a lot of string manipulation on whatever the LLM gives you because the results were so low quality at the time.
Yeah, and I want to get your perspective, and I know this is kind of tangential to what you're doing with Ellipsis, but one of the companies that hit the headlines was, I believe the name was Devin, and it's basically they're going to write code, right? You can use natural language to write code, and it's supposed to be much better than what you were referring to. Now, my experience when you're working with a platform, like I've used Runway and ML, for example, to for design work, right? In animation, and you can do that with natural language. It can be good in some instances, but when you need to do something like, oh, I need you to create let's just say a billboard with text, it's horrible at spelling, right? Um, Curious what your perspective is on AI's ability to write code using natural languages. Where are we as it relates to, someone who doesn't understand code? Can they type in and instruct AI, and that AI can output code that will actually be useful to the end user, the person who has no clue how to write it themselves?
Yeah, the short answer is no. We are not there yet. We're not going to be there in the next 5 years, I don't predict. And there's a reason for that. I feel like this is super reasonable. So today we use LLMs to generate a lot of code, as people are doing with Devin. However, these LLMs produce code that is then flawed and needs to be fixed by a human. Now, this can still be a net productivity gain for people if
Right.
they spend less time fixing the bugs, then, it would save them. So it can still be super valuable. However, we are not at a place where a non-technical person can describe something and then get an output because of the quality of the output is low and it's actually an iterative process. The way I see it today is like, okay, mankind, all software engineers, are like building houses. And we used to use a handsaw. We just got a
Mm-hmm.
power saw, which is freaking sweet. It's great, it's fast. But like sometimes it doesn't do straight lines. Sometimes it kind of goes off.
Right.
Sometimes maybe the cord doesn't reach the other side of the house, so we can't use it for all the situations. And if you were to say, okay, let's take a layman and let's like put him on a construction site and say, use this power saw to build a house, that's absolutely crazy, right?
Right.
Instead, we should find seasoned contractors, people who've been building houses for a long time, be like, hey, you used to be doing it this way. Now you can do it this way. Let's free up your time so that you are more productive. And as
Yeah.
over time, these tools, they've gotten better and they have become more accessible.
Right.
However, the quality of code has actually gone like somewhat downhill over time too, because people are using these tools to produce a lot of code, which is actually where Ellipsis comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. And we're going to transition into that. I think it's a huge space for you for that reason, right? If I'm someone who's non-technical, I may use my very limited prompt engineering skills to try to get some output from a application that's using an LLM to spit out a design or code. But the way I describe it, the app is going to interpret what I'm saying differently. So there was one example where I was like, I need a sea green surface that is plain. And it gave me the color sea green, but it was also mixing in there the actual water. No, I just want the color, right? But the LLM is interpreting what I said differently from how I intended it. And so there's an element of understanding prompt engineering. It helps me to get to a certain place further than where I would have been originally. However, there needs to be some kind of other fix to it, which requires a little bit more technical skill. I do want to talk about Ellipsis, where you all sit in this entire ecosystem. I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you introduce it. But what's the basis for Ellipsis? What prompted you to say, hey, here's a problem, we need to solve this?
Okay, so it actually goes way back to that interview technology product I was building. Like I said, I built something that took a candidate's resume and then built a code base that the candidate would then work in.
Okay.
Now, I used those early models for that, and I realized that they actually weren't that good at writing all of that code. However, if you had an existing code base and you put that in the prompt and you ask these LLMs to make a small change to it, for example, add a single line, add a method to a function, they were pretty good at that. And that's
Okay.
because that's predominantly reading and only a little bit of writing versus entirely writing when you're generating something from scratch. This is the insight that caused me to found Ellipsis and team up with Nick Bradford, my co-founder and CTO. We realized that today's LLMs are not good enough to reliably generate entire features. However, they are very good at other parts of the software development lifecycle, including code review. And so code review fundamentally is primarily a read operation. You read through all the code that a developer says, I want to propose this, I want my team to adopt this code, here's what it looks like. That's predominantly reading through their changes and then maybe tweaking a little bit of things to get it to where it needs to be over the line. And so this is why today Ellipsis reviews over 3,000 code changes daily. Yes, we do code generation. Yes, we allow our customers to specify things that they want to change about their code base. But we also say, hey, sorry, we can't handle that. That's too complex for us in the majority of use cases. So today, Ellipsis reviews code and fixes bugs. Teams that adopt our product merge their pull requests about 13% faster on average when they use our product because they get deep LLM-powered code reviews on every single code change.
If you're a hiring manager and you appreciate the unique skill sets required to build AI solutions, then I would highly suggest you get your hands on our AI Talent Salary Guide. As you know, one of the greatest challenges in building AI products is acquiring the right team. Over 100 plus pages, we dive deep into our global AI talent acquisition strategies. And with our networks in Latin America, we also provide you with actionable advice on how you can scale up your AI team cost efficiently. Once you explore our AI talent acquisition strategies, you'll never look at hiring the same way again. Links are in the description. Yeah. And why is that, right? I mean, if I wanted to write an entire code base, what you're saying is the LLM is not going to be as effective in getting the user to exactly what they want. But if you give me an entire code base, then if we need to just go in and change errors, fix bugs, the LLM, or I guess I should say Ellipsis, is going to be much better, much more productive, provide that 13% productivity gain. Why is that the case?
It's because when you think about building something up, the output of a previous step is the input to another. And so if you make a mistake on one of those steps, that error compounds, right? However, with code review, we see the entire context and we just focus in on one thing, make a code change there. We don't typically build on that. And so as a result, we can build systems that check its own output and we can be more confident in those systems.
Right.
And so today, fundamentally, Ellipsis is limited by what LLMs can use today. We use all the state-of-the-art stuff, but what we don't do is we don't promise to give, for example, a virtual software engineer. We're not replacing humans. We are just building that saw, that power tool, and like, hey, you used to do it by hand. We're going to save you some time.
What I'm hearing, though, is a huge opportunity in the sense that you've got humans writing each line of code manually, and then you progress to the point where you could use something like an LLM to produce code, which would allow for much more code to be produced. So you all are sitting in a scenario where, look, we've gone from, 100 lines of code to now, let's just say 100,000 lines of code because more can be written. But that just means more flaws, more bugs to be fixed. So now we're coming in and we're saying, hey, look, there's no way you're going to be able to review this much code efficiently. So now we can step in here and we can help you to be more efficient with your time, with your developer time.
Exactly. It's perfectly analogous. Code review automation tools are the flip side of the coin of code generation automation tools. And it's exactly right. The industry is trending in a world where big code is becoming the norm. Code bases are ballooning because the cost of producing code is going down as AI becomes more central to the software developer's workflow. By definition, that requires that we also build up tools to keep the code base clean, make sure it works, make sure the style guide that the team has agreed on is everywhere, make sure it's maintainable, scalable, no security issues. And this is where Ellipsis comes in, and this is what we do a really good job at. we give deep LLM-powered code reviews to our customers. So they catch things like logical bugs. If you click tab on your IDE, where a software engineer works, to accept an autocomplete and you're not really reading it, you might actually just push a bug, right? Ellipsis will be the second pair of eyes that checks in and makes sure that, okay, this code that this developer is proposing makes sense. Same thing with security issues. It's really easy to inadvertently introduce like a critical security bug if you're dealing in any sort of non-trivial system and you don't understand everything about the system. Ellipsis is that code-based intelligence tool that has that 1,000-foot view, that big picture understanding. And it says like, hey, if you write that database over here, that row to a database over here, we're going to have problems down the line here. And Ellipsis will give that second opinion.
So for folks who may have never been a part of any type of product development from a code perspective, traditionally, what has been the process that a team would go through for code review?
It's not unlike a team of lawyers iterating on a document or students iterating on a group project PowerPoint presentation. One developer will submit a change, a proposed change to the document that the team shares, and then one or more other developers will review it. They'll check to make sure that the code makes sense, it accomplishes the goal, and that it's the cleanest way to accomplish that goal. Now, once it's gone through that process, it's accepted and it becomes an asset owned by the entire team rather than just by the developer proposing it. However, with Ellipsis, we jump in as a layer in that code review process. So before another human gets involved to go look at the proposed code, teams typically require that the submitter get a sign off from Ellipsis. So that means they get a looks good to me from the bot, and that is permission to then go involve another human. And this protects the time of that second human. And as a result, there's some back and forth with Ellipsis and the author. And as a result, the quality of the deliverable that another human looks at is higher. So the conversation is about more important things. If you've ever talked to a software engineer who works on a team, you will probably get some strong feelings about this process because engineers are opinionated, there are multiple right ways to do something, and there's a lot of different dimensions for like personalization when writing code. For example, you could name a variable name myCalculator or supercalc or advanced calculator or anything like that, and they're all equal, right? It's the team that needs to decide what is the best name for this. And so two devs could argue about that. However, when a company adopts Ellipsis, they write down style guide rules, like classes should always be named the shortest possible thing. So maybe calc is the name of the class in this example. Then when another person goes to review it, Ellipsis will have made sure the name is calc by the time that the second reviewer is involved. And so as a result, that's not on the table for discussion anymore. The team is actually talking about higher level, more interesting things like systems design or architecture, the best way to roll out the release, rather than pedantic, detailed comments like, what is the name of my variable?
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, in my world, finance, right, one of the big things is modeling in Excel, right? But every company has their own best practices for how someone should name a certain variable, right? In your example, very similar. And so if you've got folks they know how to model, but maybe they're a new hire. And what you're saying is we can actually customize the best practices to the company that's using our code review, and we can automatically go in there and suggest these changes, which allows someone to adopt their style of coding to the company's best practices, make sure the team is all on one page more quickly versus only focusing on errors or security issues.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the coolest parts about Ellipsis is that when a team installs the product, we go back in time and look through their historical code changes to figure out what those rules are. So we don't require somebody specify them explicitly. We will just sit in the background and learn how the team writes code and then chime in later on when there have been violations of that standardization.
Yeah, interesting. And along those lines, if I'm an organization, maybe I'm the VP of engineering and I have a certain way that I like to see the code, but the majority of the code that you're going to train on previously, it's not done, and maybe it's not done in the way that I like it. is there a way that we can correct for that? And let's say, hey, look, here's how we want these particular variables to be displayed. But, this is the code I wrote. I know we got a bunch of other codes that says differently, but this is how we want it done moving forward.
Yeah, one of the coolest parts about today's LLMs is that the personalization aspect can go really deep. So our product picks up on individuals' preferences, and we actually get retrained over time. Every single night we update this on what the customer's code base should look like and what we're following. And so, for example, during that code review process, we leave comments on a specific line of code that says like, hey, this line should be this way, it's that way.
Mhm.
Developers can then go leave effectively an upvote or a downvote on that comment, and then
Right.
Ellipsis will pick up on this in the future and possibly never leave that comment again, or always leave that comment if the team thinks it's a really helpful one. And so this is one element of team personalization. And then we also do it for individuals. We know that if Tony always writes his code like this, and we've said, hey, Tony, you should write your code like that, and he always thumbs downs us, then we don't leave that comment for Tony. We don't bother him anymore.
Yeah. Is there an element of the what I've heard? I'm not a coder myself, but like if maybe I write some code and I did it in 10 lines, but I could have done it in 2 lines. I imagine the preferences for 2 lines. Is there an ability to kind of help make code more efficient in that way?
Yeah, so there's two dimensions of efficiency. The first is what compute resources are used when the code runs. So it's
Okay.
eventually it's deployed to a server somewhere, and like maybe your cell phone is calling it or a website is reaching out to it. And if it takes 2 units of compute power to power something, and you can do it in 1 unit instead, you should probably do it in 1 unit because the way people buy compute is per compute hour. And so it's actually cheaper to make it more efficient. So this is like the runtime optimization. We can absolutely help out here. Ellipsis does this because it's trained on all of the Stack Overflow, all the Reddit comments, all the GitHub data, all this stuff goes into it. So we understand the best way of doing a lot of very common patterns. And then the
Okay.
other element, the other like way of optimization is development experience optimization. If something can be done in 10 lines, but it could also be done in 2 lines, the 2-line implementation is generally preferred as long as it's cognitively simpler, right? If it's so short because it's all bunched together, that actually might be cognitively more complex. And if a
Okay.
developer has to go make a change in that part of the code base, they might be slowed down where that 10-line implementation is, longer but easier to reason about. And so these are two dimensions that we allow our customers to train the behavior of our product. And we like effectively go out and say, okay, I don't think that this VP of Eng is going to like this solution, therefore we should leave a comment on it because it violates these things.
Is there any element of, I know documentation in the world of coding is important. Do you all tap into that side of the coding process as well?
Yeah, so we use first and third party documentation. First party meaning inside your code base, if you write docs, we will use those to inform our understanding of your code base so we can do better code review, right? So maybe documentation is about like how your team uses a certain technology in a certain way. That's really helpful for us. And then the third party documentations are when our agent goes out to the internet to understand how a popular library or framework or technology is used. And this is what allows us to reason about code bases that are using technologies that are newer than the training cutoff is a term of like when the LLM was trained, it could only see up to the internet of a certain state. And so if I released a new package or new version of something after the training cutoff for GPT-4, it actually is not going to know about it. However, Ellipsis goes out onto the web, tries to find the docs, reads those docs, and then uses that in the code base. So we can see past that training cutoff the horizon.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm curious as it relates to you having an AI platform, being a startup, right? If we think about the broader category of AI, not specifically focused on LLMs, but if I'm a larger organization, I've got a ton of data to then go ahead and train a model. But if I'm a startup, I'm starting from zero, I probably need some sort of data to start training a model so that I can have a product that I can then deliver. What was the starting point for you all as it relates to, actually having AI product as a start from zero type of scenario?
So we don't train our own models, and we actually have this idea that we don't need to. And that's because the AI revolution that we're living through right now has introduced a new primitive into the world, which is the token-based large language model. In other words,
Hmm.
you write some string and then you get some string out. Now, this is a primitive in that it can be used for anything, and you can stack this and build on top of it and make the output of one LLM the input of another. It's called chaining. And
Hmm.
so if you are creative enough in how to apply these LLM calls to one another, you soon realize that there are a whole bunch of different applications and a whole bunch of ways you can save people time. And as a result, you don't need to, as an entrepreneur, you don't need to go train your own model. You're like, hey, I can find a domain, a part of the world, a business problem where LLMs have not been brought to, and I can deliver a lot of value for other people in that way. And so if you kind of take this mindset, the idea of training your own model and collecting your own data becomes a distraction, right? Because if your
Right.
end goal as an entrepreneur is to help somebody do something faster to create value or better in some way, then this is actually not something you need to do right off the bat. Now, of
Yeah.
course, in the long term, it'll help if you have, the best code review model or the best code generation tool, something like that. But today, we're in such an exciting time period that you just need to find a problem that can be automated using this new primitive.
Yeah, interesting. And as it relates to like the code review, bug fixing, where do you guys go beyond in terms of like maybe I could just plug into ChatGPT and say, "Hey, review my code. Tell me what's wrong with my code. Fix any bugs in my code." Where does Ellipsis go above and beyond that simplified approach?
Yeah, we have a much more powerful tool. And so we have built a code-based intelligence system that sees beyond the things that a developer sees on their screen in their web browser. We see what a team has been working on for the past 3 weeks. We see what a team is scheduled to do in the next 3 months. We see all of the other code changes that everyone in the organization is trying to do to get an idea of what is the team working like, what is the productivity like, what type of changes are they making. And these are all team level data points, not individual level data points. They resolve at
Mhm.
the organization that if you were to like copy paste in a chat GPT, you wouldn't get. And so we bundle all this together in what we call our code-based intelligence platform. And
Mhm.
if you look at it, you get actually some really cool features. You get the ability to ask questions, say like, hey, when is that front end change going to be done? Or when are we
Mhm.
going to release our iOS app? And then you also get this idea of reports like, okay, Ellipsis, every day send me an email of the most important things that my company shipped yesterday. And so this is a functionality that we offer. As it happens, code review is just one of those data points. And today we automate that process. But in the future, this will be like even more widespread. So it'll be code generation functionalities like, hey, let's just go through my product roadmap and find all of the really tiny bug reports that you can handle and then just go fix them for me. And as
Mm.
these LLMs get better, the scope and the complexity of the things that we take on increases. But even at its smallest point today, this is like team level data, and it's like more like a virtual assistant rather than just like a tool that
Right.
somebody is using.
Yeah. And given you're in this space, what's your perspective? Or maybe I should frame the question like this. If I'm an engineer and I'm saying, hey, I'm seeing a lot of automations on code generation and code review, what does that mean for me as someone who specializes in writing code?
Yeah, it means that you as a developer should become a master of these tools. And that is how you are going to be one of the most productive developers, maybe ever. Because we live in a really cool time right now where this job is like there was a step function likelihood in this job being automated. And that had happened in the past couple of years with these LLMs coming out right now. And so during that time period, you as an individual contributor probably need to transition your skills from, hello, I type really fast, I have a cool keyboard, I put out a lot of code, to, oh, now I'm like a systems level awareness. I understand
Mhm.
architecture, I get trade-off decisions, I know where everything is, and I'm able to prompt these LLMs. And so then, if you have those skills, you're set up for a future where LLMs do the majority of like the workhorse, they're like
Mhm.
workhorses,
Mhm.
and then the developer is like the coordinator. And so this is our vision with Ellipsis. We want to make the threshold of the productivity of any one person, how quickly that person can approve changes that an LLM produces. which is different than today, because today the bottleneck is how quickly can I type things out and actually bring
Right.
it to life onto my screen.
Right. Yeah. So begs the question, if I'm a developer and I say, hey, look, I want to use Ellipsis, is it something that I can hop in free trial or is the approach to, hey, it's an organizational approach first, just because, there's a lot of data that you need to tap into. I'm curious how an individual developer or, someone in the C-suite might get started with Ellipsis.
Both of those customers have the opportunity to start a 7-day trial for free. You can install in 2 clicks at ellipsis.dev, and you'll get a really similar customer experience. So the organizations, we pull more data, we connect to the roadmap, we offer a Slack integration, we can, send emails and things like that. The individuals, we connect directly to their GitHub, and we pull that historical data. And so for both people, there's a lot of, for both those customers, there's a lot of value. But the coolest part is that anybody can start a free trial in 2 clicks at ellipsis.dev.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So if it's the organization that you can get more deeply ingrained and get some, I don't want to say more value, but I mean, they have more data, which they'd be able to look into. If I'm the individual, there's still some on my own machine, right? I'd be able to kind of work with Ellipsis and figure out, okay, check my code, review my code here. Tell me where there may be areas or security issues.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because our product is designed to improve team software development efficiency. And
Hmm.
the concept of the team kind of goes out the window if you're a single developer.
Yeah.
However, we have some pretty sweet features for single devs that I can't wait for your audience to check out.
Awesome. What do you say to the organization that's concerned about Ellipsis reading its code?
Yeah, that's a totally fair concern. So our stance at Ellipsis is that we never persist any customer code to disk anywhere. We don't train any models on your code. We don't fine tune anything on your code. We don't even write it in a database and store it. However, we do need to read that into memory while we're handling the request. So while our servers are listening to your behavior in GitHub, the stream of events that your team is doing, we handle those in memory, but we wipe it as soon as it's done, and they're all isolated. And so this is kind of the happy compromise that we've noticed organizations are like, yeah, I want the value of it, but
Right.
I like also have this nervousness. And of course, we're SOC 2 type 1 compliant, and we have regular pen tests where people try and hack us and they're unable to. And so this is a really important way that we build customer trust.
Yeah. And along those lines, as you think about accountability, right? I can imagine scenarios where someone's like, yeah, I ran it through Ellipsis and there was no issue. So it's not my fault. It's Ellipsis's fault. Like, have you come across any issues like that? Or maybe even if there is a dev that is using Ellipsis and and wants to use that as a I'll say an excuse, what are your thoughts there? Curious because in finance, right, there are scenarios like that. Wait, the data that got imported, it came in from FactSet and it was incorrect. That's not my fault. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
So we do not replace the software with the code review process. We are a layer in it that speeds up some of the stuff. And so if our selling point was, hello, no human will ever have to look at your code, then we would be responsible on the hook for this. However,
Mhm.
instead, our value prop is more, hey, we'll catch all those mistakes that you're making so that your team can be more efficient when they look at it. And so we don't want to replace humans for this type of thing. There'll always be an element. Their humans always need to be involved because they understand what they're building for. They know things that could only be known by other humans. For example, what is the emotional connection to the product? How should it feel when it's used? What type of things has the team has been talking about at happy hour that are not
Yeah.
written down in Notion or Slack that Ellipsis could read? Stuff like that. And so, like, if somebody came to me and said, well, you said my code was good, but there was a bug in it, I would be like, boy, you haven't been a software developer very long, because another human could do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned a co-founder. The name escapes me. I was trying to remember what you said previously. Also technical. I know you had the software engineering background, co-founder, also technical. And where I want to go with this is just understanding, the team and then how you all have thought about, building out the team. What were the first few necessary positions that you needed to fill?
Totally. Yeah. So Nick and I teamed up in August of 2023. Luckily, he was working on a side project that was very similar to what was the early version of Ellipsis. So it made perfect sense for us to start working together. He's our CTO, co-founder. He's super technical. He comes from a machine learning background. He's done research in the Bay and all this stuff. And our thought process was basically like, listen, if we're going to build a developer tool and then sell to developers, we ourselves need to be technical. There's no good way that I've ever figured out to build trust with engineering leadership without yourself being an engineer. And that's because developers don't want to be sold to. They want to be shown how something works and then choose it themselves. And like that resonates with me. I still kind of cringe when I have to go into sales calls these days. And well, at least in the early days, and I've structured those sales calls to be like, here's what the product does, and here's the price. You can put in your credit card on this page, right? And this is kind of how we've gotten around this and resonate with people. So yeah, we are like super technical team. We ship code many times a day. We use our own product to build our product, which is a really cool way that we keep in touch with our customers. We understand the pain points often before customers write in and it's like, hey, I think something's broken. And I think we'll continue this ethos. Today, it's just my co-founder and I. We raised a $2 million seed round in April after doing Y Combinator's Winter 24 batch.
Awesome.
And
Congratulations.
thanks. I don't think that there is much of an incentive to hire anybody who doesn't write code. And that's because we want to stay super attached to our customers. Our goal at the moment is, yes, to build a unicorn with a valuation of $1 billion or more, but second to that, to also build a 10-person unicorn. Because if we can do that, it shows how valuable our own product is.
Awesome. Yeah, 10-person unicorn would be incredible. I know in the entrepreneurial world, there's a ton of folks talking about the 1-person $1 million company, but the 10-person $1 billion company is also awesome. Like, would be awesome to accomplish. Finish Y Combinator you mentioned April?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything, seems like a huge opportunity just because all of the companies there are on the tech side, but anything specific that you all were able to particularly benefit during the experience with the accelerator?
Oh, I couldn't recommend YC enough. Y Combinator, and especially working with Dalton Caldwell, Gary Tan, Brad, Dave, Gustav. These folks are super smart. They've been around the block before. They've literally seen hundreds of companies, including like unicorns like Airbnb, DoorDash, these type of companies. So they know how things are done effectively, right? And so their advice allows us to leapfrog problems. And where they tell us to spend our time and our attention, we pretty much just listen to and we lean on their experience there. And that's super valuable. Of course, we know our customers more because we talk with them every day, but they are really helpful for this experience, this wealth of experience. So I definitely recommend people working or entrepreneurs working with tenured VCs, especially the partners at Y Combinator, should they get the opportunity to. And then also the other part of this is that the YC network is immaculate. It's some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. The founder of Gmail followed me on Twitter the other day because I tweeted about YC. It's seriously really cool. And when you're in San Francisco and you're in the batch and you're rubbing shoulders with these people, like magic happens. Like it is just serendipity, like on steroids. And people who are really smart try your product. They give you new perspectives about it. They are subject matter experts probably in something that you're not familiar about at all. So they offer really valuable high density knowledge trading conversations, which is really cool. And it's like there's no other way to put it. I guess there's like a no assholes rule.
Okay.
And so everybody is really helpful, excited to get back to the community and really good for one another.
Yeah, any insights post Y Combinator, right? Great experience, it sounds like. Then you went on to raise a $2 million round. I'm curious about your fundraising experience, specifically as a company that's sitting within this AI space. All right. AI has been one of the few areas for startups that has actually seen growth in funding year over year. Everywhere else is kind of like a desert, right? But for you, were there specific things that you could point to in your conversation with VCs that was relevant is relevant to you being a company sitting specifically within this space as an AI tool, AI developer tool?
Yeah, AI dev tools is super crowded. Business Insider featured us in an article recently, and they said that over $730 million has been raised so far in 2024 by AI dev tools, We raised 2 of those million. So that equates to 0.25% of all of the money raised went towards Ellipsis. And I think that is a very low amount. However, we have a really successful product. Over 150 companies are using us today. We're reviewing 3,000 code changes a day. And so if you go weigh the money, the revenue that our company is making compared to the revenue that other companies are making, I think we punch way above 0.25%. And so to me, that says if you want to go raise money in a crowded space, you need traction. You need somebody paying you. You need demonstrated ability to help someone do something such that they will pay you for. You can't just raise on hype. You can't just raise on an idea. If so, you run the risk of diluting yourself. Like you don't want a delusion. You don't want to be like pretending you have some great thing when really it's, this rising tide lifts all boats type of vibe going on.
Right, right. And so were there specific questions where you saw these? So there was a time when if anyone was anywhere near the AI, in or around the AI space, right? It's like, hey, yeah, bump in valuation, better ability to raise capital. Then VCs got a little bit smarter and realized that you can't just put .ai at the end of your URL and say you're an AI startup or AI tangential, right? Were there any questions, right? And I'm thinking about more for founders who do want to go out and raise and are in and around this space. Were there any questions that you found that were particularly helpful to be able to answer around the technology that came from investors? I know traction is important. I know your ability to solve a real problem is important, but specifically kind of around the technology. And I think you guys are in an interesting spot because you're like, hey, listen, we're not developing our own models. We're understanding how to use existing tools, pull those together in our platform to accelerate productivity. Long-winded answer, but if you could tackle that for me, I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. In a nutshell, my VC calls in early 2024 kind of felt like machine learning interviews. And I was an MLE at AWS, so I know what this interview feels like. And VCs were kind of like probing my understanding of machine learning and AI and LLMs and stuff to get a sense of, is this dude legit? And so I think I was able to lean on my technical background and my co-founder's really impressive resume here to like answer a lot of questions and get a lot of confidence going behind my team and my company. And so if this is a new field for you, I would straight up just study for a machine learning interview. Like pretend you're going over to Meta or Twitter or something like that, and like you're applying for an MLE position. Go learn the Coursera, go do the Udemy courses to understand like what does a production scale ML system look like? Because that will give you the vernacular. It will give you like all of those nonverbal ways that we communicate with people, like body language and confidence and tone of voice. And it will make you sound like you know your stuff better. And I think that part of the game VCs, part of the challenge VCs have these days is weeding out those who are on the hype train and those who understand the stuff. And so the better you can understand the stuff, the better that will come across and win in your favor.
Awesome. No, super helpful. All right. I know we're coming up on time here, but we got a few more minutes left. I did want to leave that time for, if you can, share anything we should be looking forward to from Ellipsis, any foreshadowing you could do. I actually did it a bit earlier. You were excited about some things that are going to come out in the future. If you could talk about that, we'd love to hear about it.
Totally. So like I said, we have this code-based intelligence platform. We're always adding features to that because they make our other features smarter. But some of these features we're also allowing customers to access directly. So today, if you go to www.ellipsis.dev/reports, you'll get taken to our alpha version of a website where you can put in any code base, any public code base, and then get a summary of the changes in that project. You can see if the team is doing feature development or bug fixes, if they are working on internal things or customer-facing stuff. And this is a peek behind the curtain of what our product uses, the information we use to review code. And so if you're a non-technical person working at a company that writes a lot of code, go put your team's code base in there. And if it's a private company, private code base, go ask your engineering manager to install, and then you can get this report. And we will deliver it to your inbox weekly, daily, or send it to you in Slack. This is a really cool way for technical adjacent people who are interested in like how the product is developing, how code base is developing, to get AI generated summaries of what a team is working on. Of course, during code review, we use these internally to aid the code review process. And so this will give you some insight and like, all right, what do these dev tools actually know about our team?
Perfect. And as a precursor to that, for someone who says, hey, look, I'm non-technical, I don't code, but I would like to do something like what you were doing when you were using Codex, just use my natural language to try to create a very basic program. Where would you recommend that they go to get started with that?
You should install our free tier. So any individual developers can install our product and they'll get several days of free use out of Ellipsis, and then some features will be free for them, such as code review and PR summaries. So if you are somebody who's teaching yourself to code and playing around with these LLMs, put us in your GitHub account. You will get a second pair of eyes on your code changes, and you'll be able to ask our bot questions like, hey, does this make sense? Did I build this in a way that's reasonable? How would you suggest that I build this instead, Ellipsis? Can you go build that for me?
Awesome. Awesome. Super helpful. And Hunter, I appreciate you taking some time out to just kind of lay all of this out for us. We'll make sure we get all of the references you made tagged up because a lot of helpful resources there. But again, appreciate you taking some time to join us, Hunter.
Thanks so much for having me.